The cold metal walls of the deep space station hummed with quiet energy as Commander Jake Morrison stared at the massive display screen. Tiny dots of light moved across the star map, like deadly fireflies, each one representing a warship locked in brutal combat. The Zephyrian Empire and the Keldan Federation had been tearing each other apart for 30 years now, and Jake had watched every moment of it from his post aboard Aurora's Edge. Another battle group just went dark in the Vega sector, reported Lieutenant Sam Hughes from his console. The young officer's voice carried the same tired tone that everyone on the station had developed over the years. Watching civilizations destroy themselves became routine after a while, even when the numbers were staggering. Jake nodded and made a note in his log. 300 Zephyrian ships had vanished in the last 6 hours. That meant roughly 50,000 alien lives lost, assuming standard crew sizes. Tomorrow it will be the Keldans losing ships, and the cycle will continue as it had for 3 decades. Dr. Lisa Blake entered the command center carrying a datapad and wearing the expression she always had when reviewing casualty reports. As the station's lead xenobiologist, she tracked more than just ship movements. She counted the costs and lives, families, and entire species caught in the crossfire. The latest intelligence reports are in, Lisa said, settling into her chair next to Jake's command station. Both sides are preparing for another major offensive. The Keldans are massing forces near Proxima Centauri, and the Zephyrians are moving battle fleets toward the Kepler system. Jake studied the data on her pad. The numbers were enormous. Each side had committed over 2 million ships to this new phase of fighting. The destruction would be visible from Earth if anyone looked through a powerful enough telescope. Any word from the Council? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Same response as always. Lisa replied with a slight shake of her head. Earth maintains strict neutrality. We observe and record, but we do not interfere. The Prime Minister was very clear in her latest message. Captain Ryan Torres walked into the command center just in time to hear Lisa's report. As the station's diplomatic officer, Ryan spent most of his time ensuring that both alien factions understood Earth's position. It was not an easy job, especially when both sides regularly tried to drag humanity into their conflict. I just finished another conference call with Zephyrian High Command, Ryan said, rubbing his tired eyes. They offered us mining rights to 12 star systems if we provide them with weapons technology. When I declined, they accused us of secretly helping the Keldans. And yesterday the Keldans made the exact same accusation about us helping the Zephyrians. Jake said, with dark humor, at least they're consistent in their paranoia. The truth was that Earth had good reasons for staying out of the war. When first contact happened 60 years ago, humanity discovered they were newcomers to a galaxy already divided into dozens of competing empires and federations. The smart move was to avoid picking sides and focus on building Earth's strength while others fought. But watching from the sidelines had grown harder over the years. Jake remembered when the war started as a border dispute over mining rights in the Orion Arm. Both sides claimed the other had attacked first. Both sides claimed they were fighting for freedom and justice. Both sides were probably lying. Sir, we're getting reports of civilian evacuations from the Kepler colonies. Lieutenant Hughes called out from his station. Both sides are targeting infrastructure now. Hospitals, schools, residential areas. They're not even pretending to follow the old rules of engagement anymore. Lisa looked up from her data pad with concern. How many civilians are we talking about? Current estimates suggest around 5 million refugees across 7 worlds. Hughes replied. Most are heading for the Outer Rim territories, but they don't have enough ships or supplies. Jake felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. This was the part of neutrality that kept him awake at night. Earth had the resources to help those refugees. Human medical technology was advanced enough to treat alien injuries. Human ships were fast enough to evacuate entire populations. But helping civilians might be seen as taking sides. What's Earth's official position on humanitarian aid? Ryan asked, though he already knew this answer too. The Council voted last month, Jake replied. Any direct assistance to war refugees could be interpreted as supporting one side over the other. We're authorized to provide information about safe travel routes, but nothing more. Dr. Blake stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the metal floor. 5 million sentient beings are about to die from starvation and disease. and we're worried about hurting someone's feelings? It's not about feelings, Lisa, Jake said gently. It's about survival. Earth has 4 billion people, and maybe 1,000 warp-capable ships. The Zephyrian Empire alone has 50,000 worlds and a battle fleet that could glass our entire planet in a few hours. We stay neutral because we have to. I understand the logic, Lisa said, her voice tight with frustration, but understanding it doesn't make it feel right. The command center fell silent except for the steady hum of the station systems. On the main screen, more dots disappeared as another skirmish ended with mutual destruction. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, rescue pods drifted without power while their occupants slowly suffocated. Somewhere else, refugee camps struggled with food shortages and medical supplies that would never come. Lieutenant Hughes broke the silence with another report. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Keldon 4th Fleet. They want to know if we're willing to sell them navigational data for safe passage through Centauri Nebula. Jake sighed. Both sides constantly tried to buy information from Earth's monitoring stations. Human sensors were better than most alien technology, and 30 years of careful observation had given Earth detailed maps of every star system in the war zone. Standard response, Lieutenant. Earth maintains neutrality and does not provide military assistance to any faction. Already sent, sir. Captain Torres checked his watch and headed for the door. I have another diplomatic call with Zephyrian representatives in 20 minutes. They want to discuss establishing a human embassy on their capital world. Should be interesting. After Ryan left, Jake and Lisa sat in comfortable silence, watching the eternal dance of destruction on their screens. 3 decades of war had killed billions of sentient beings and devastated entire star systems. But it had also kept Earth safe from the chaos that consumed the rest of the galaxy. Do you ever wonder what would happen if we did get involved? Lisa asked quietly. Jake considered the question carefully. Every day. But then I remember that the moment we pick a side, we become a target. And unlike these alien empires, we don't have backup colonies scattered across hundreds of worlds. The dots on the screen continued their deadly ballet, and Earth remained safely on the sidelines, watching history unfold from a distance. 3 weeks after the massive refugee evacuations began, the situation had grown desperate. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the communications center aboard Aurora's Edge, watching incoming reports from the Outer Rim territories. The numbers were worse than anyone had predicted. We're looking at nearly 8 million displaced beings now, Dr. Lisa Blake reported, her voice heavy with exhaustion. She had been working 18-hour days trying to track refugee movements and coordinate with aid organizations. The camps on Kepler 442b are completely overwhelmed. Lieutenant Sam Hughes looked up from his monitoring station with grim news. Both the Zephyrian and Keldon fleets have abandoned the refugee zones entirely. They're calling it strategic redeployment, but really they just don't want to waste resources protecting civilians. Jake studied the latest satellite images from Kepler 442b. What had once been a thriving mining colony was now a sprawling maze of temporary shelters and medical tents. Families from a dozen different species huddled together in camps that lacked basic sanitation, clean water, and adequate food supplies. How long before disease breaks out? Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. It already has, Lisa replied, pulling up medical reports on her screen. 3 different plague outbreaks in the northern camps. The local medical facilities can't handle the volume, and they don't have treatments that work for all the different species. Captain Ryan Torres entered the communications center, carrying a secure message pad. His usually calm demeanor had cracked over the past few weeks as diplomatic channels filled with increasingly desperate pleas for help. I just received another formal request from the Refugee Council, Ryan said. They're specifically asking for human medical assistance. Apparently, our multi-species treatment protocols are more advanced than anything the local authorities have access to. Jake felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders. Earth's medical technology had advanced rapidly during 60 years of contact with alien species. Human doctors could treat injuries and diseases that would kill members of other civilizations. But providing that aid would mean taking a side. What's the Council's position? Jake asked. Prime Minister Stone's office sent a response this morning, Ryan replied, his voice carefully neutral. Quote, Earth sympathizes with the humanitarian crisis, but cannot provide direct medical intervention without compromising our neutrality in the ongoing conflict. End quote. Dr. Blake slammed her datapad down on the nearest console. 8 million beings are dying, and we're worried about political complications? This isn't about the war anymore, Jake. These are families, children, elderly people who never chose to be part of this conflict. Lisa, you know I agree with you, Jake said quietly. But you also know the reality of our situation. The moment we land medical ships in those refugee camps, both sides will claim we're favoring their enemies. So we let them die to keep our hands clean? Before Jake could respond, Lieutenant Hughes called out from his station. Sir, I'm picking up something interesting in the refugee communication logs. Take a look at this. Hughes transferred his data to the main screen, showing communication records from the camps on Kepler 442b. Mixed in with a standard request for supplies and medical aid were names and species identifiers that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. Are those? Jake started. Altarians, Lisa finished, reading over his shoulder. And Centaurians. And vegan traders. These are the species that helped us during first contact. Some of these families provided sanctuary for human diplomats when the Zephyrians wanted to execute them as spies. Jake remembered the stories from his academy training. In the early days of human expansion, several alien species had risked their own safety to protect human explorers and diplomats. The Altarians had hidden a human research team from Zephyrian death squads. The Centaurians had provided medical treatment when human colonists faced a plague outbreak. The vegans had served as neutral mediators when Earth's first trade agreements almost sparked a war. How many? Jake asked. Hughes ran the numbers quickly. At least 50,000 beings from species that provided direct assistance to humanity in the past 60 years. Maybe more if we include their descendants. Captain Torres set down his message pad and studied the data. This changes things, doesn't it? These aren't random civilians caught in someone else's war. These are people who helped us when we needed it most. It changes the moral equation, Lisa said firmly, but I'm not sure it changes the political reality. Jake walked to the main window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, families who had once sheltered human children were now watching their own children die from preventable diseases. Species that shared their medical knowledge with Earth were now begging for the same kind of help in return. Sir, Hughes called out again. We're receiving a direct transmission from Admiral Susan right aboard the U.S. Constitution. She's requesting a secure channel. Jake nodded and moved to the communication station. Admiral Wright commanded Earth's Deep Space Patrol Fleet, and her ship was currently positioned near the edge of the war zone. When her image appeared on the screen, Jake could see the same troubled expression that had been haunting his own sleep. Commander Morrison, Admiral Wright said without preamble, I assume you've seen the refugee situation reports? Yes, ma'am. We've been monitoring the crisis for weeks. Then you know that we have a moral obligation to act. I prepared a humanitarian relief mission with medical ships and supply vessels, enough to make a real difference in those camps. Jake felt his heart rate increase. Admiral, the Prime Minister has been very clear about Earth's position on direct intervention. The Prime Minister is a politician, commander. She's thinking about election cycles and trade agreements. I'm thinking about the oath I swore to protect innocent life wherever humans encounter it. Dr. Blake stepped closer to the communication screen. Admiral Wright, what kind of opposition will humanitarian mission face? Minimal, Dr. Blake. Both alien fleets have pulled back to defensive positions around their core worlds. The refugee zones are essentially uncontrolled space now. We could get in, provide aid, and get out without encountering either side's military forces. Captain Torres joined the conversation. The diplomatic risks would be enormous, Admiral. Even a purely humanitarian mission could be seen as choosing sides. Captain Torres, with respect, people are dying while we debate diplomatic niceties. The Altarians who are suffering in those camps once risked execution to hide human families from Zephyrian kill squads. The Centaurians shared their medical technology when human colonies face extinction. We owe them better than political excuses. Jake studied the Admiral's face on the screen. Susan Wright was known throughout the fleet as someone who valued honor above politics. If she was willing to risk her career on a humanitarian mission, the situation had to be even worse than the reports indicated. Admiral, what would you need from Aurora's Edge? Detailed intelligence on refugee camp locations, safe travel routes through the contested zones, and current threat assessments for the region around Kepler 442b. Your monitoring station has better data than anyone else. Jake looked around the communication center at his team. Lisa was nodding enthusiastically. Torres looked torn between duty and conscience. Hughes was already pulling up the requested intelligence data. I'll need to clear this with Earth Command, Jake said finally. Of course. But Commander, while you're waiting for bureaucrats to make decisions, children are dying in those camps. Some of them belong to families that saved human lives when we were the ones who needed help. The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. In the silence that followed, he could hear the steady hum of the station systems and the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Somewhere in that electronic symphony was the sound of his own conscience, demanding that he choose between orders and honor. Dr. Helen Carter was reviewing protein synthesis data when the first explosion shook the research station. The Titan facility had been studying alien biology for 15 years, tucked safely in Saturn's orbit far from the Galactic War. Helen dropped her coffee cup as emergency alarms began screaming throughout the complex. All personnel to emergency stations, the automated voice announced. This is not a drill. All personnel to emergency stations immediately. Helen ran toward the communication center, her research team close behind. Dr. Alex Bennett, her lead biochemist, was already trying to establish contact with Earth Command. The station's communications array was sparking in damage, making clear transmission impossible. What's happening? Helen shouted over the alarms. Unknown ships dropped out of hyperspace 10 minutes ago, Bennett replied, working frantically at his console. They're firing on the station without any warning or identification. Through the observation windows, Helen could see sleek alien warships circling the research facility like predators. Their hulls bore the distinctive silver markings of the Zephyrian Empire, but that made no sense. Earth was neutral. The research station was clearly marked with human identification codes. Another explosion rocked the facility, this one much closer. Helen felt the artificial gravity fluctuate as power systems throughout the station began failing. In the biology lab, years of careful research on alien genetic structures was being destroyed by fire and decompression. I'm getting something on the emergency channel, Bennett called out. It's the lead Zephyrian ship. The main screen flickered to life, showing the angular face of a Zephyrian military commander. His expression was cold and completely without mercy. Behind him, Helen could see other Zephyrian officers preparing targeting data for their weapons. Human Research Facility, the commander said in heavily accented standard, you are developing biological weapons for the Keldan Federation. This facility will be destroyed to protect Zephyrian civilians from your illegal weapons program. Helen stared at the screen in shock. Commander, this is Dr. Helen Carter of the Titan Research Station. We are a civilian facility conducting medical research to help war refugees. We are not developing weapons of any kind. Your lives will not save you, human. Zephyrian intelligence has confirmed that this station is creating bioweapons targeting Zephyrian genetic markers. Your species claims neutrality while secretly supporting our enemies. That's completely false. Helen protested. Our research focuses on developing medical treatments that work across multiple species. We're trying to help civilians injured in your war, not harm anyone. The Zephyrian commander's expression didn't change. Zephyrian High Command has determined that human neutrality is a deception. This facility represents a clear threat to Zephyrian security and must be eliminated. The transmission cut off, leaving Helen and her team staring at static. Around them, the station continued to shake as Zephyrian weapons tore through the outer hull. Emergency power flickered on and off, casting strange shadows across the research labs. Emergency pods, Bennett said, grabbing Helen's arm. We need to get to the emergency pods now. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and sparks, dodging debris from damaged ceiling panels. Other research staff were already heading for the evacuation stations, But Helen could see that several sections of the facility were completely cut off by hull breaches. Dr. Sarah Murphy, the station's youngest researcher, was trapped in the genetics lab when the hull gave way. Helen watched in horror as the young scientist was sucked into space along with 15 years of research data. There was nothing anyone could do except keep running. The evacuation pod bay was in chaos. Emergency lights cast everything in red, and the sound of groaning metal filled the air as the station structure began to collapse. Helen helped load injured researchers into pods, while Bennett worked to override damaged launch systems. "Helen, you need to get in a pod now," Bennett said. "The station's reactor is showing critical readings. We have maybe 5 minutes before total structural failure." Helen took one last look around the evacuation bay, counting heads and making sure no one was left behind. 27 people had made it to the pods. The station normally housed 150 researchers and support staff. As her emergency pod launched from the dying station, Helen watched through the small window as Zephyrian ships continued firing on the Titan facility. Even after it was clear that the station was evacuated and no longer functional, they kept shooting. It was as if they wanted to erase every trace of human presence from Saturn's orbit. The research station that had been her home for 8 years exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Decades of scientific advancement, irreplaceable research data, and 127 human lives vanished in an instant. Helen closed her eyes and tried not to think about her colleagues who hadn't made it to the evacuation bays. 3 hours later, Earth Command rescue ships arrived to collect the survivors. Captain Dan Walsh of the U.S. Recovery pulled Helen aboard his ship and immediately began demanding answers. "Dr. Carter, what the hell happened out there? Our sensors detected Zephyrian warships in Earth space, but that's impossible. They know Saturn's orbit is neutral territory." Helen accepted a blanket and hot coffee before responding. "They accused us of developing biological weapons for the Keldan Federation. When I tried to explain that we were conducting medical research, they cut the transmission and started shooting. Biological weapons? That's insane. Your facility's research records are public. Everyone knows you were working on multi-species medical treatments." The commander said Zephyrian intelligence had evidence of a weapons program targeting Zephyrian genetic markers. He claimed human neutrality was a deception and that we were secretly supporting their enemies. Captain Walsh looked grim. "This is going to change everything. They attacked a civilian research facility in Earth space. They killed over 100 human civilians based on false intelligence. This isn't just a diplomatic incident anymore." On the rescue ship's main screen, Helen could see other human vessels arriving in Saturn's orbit. Military ships this time, not just rescue vessels. The U.S. Arizona and U.S. Colorado took up defensive positions while smaller ships searched the debris field for survivors. Helen knew there wouldn't be many survivors to find. The Zephyrians had been thorough in their destruction of the research station. They had wanted to send a message, and the message was clear. Human neutrality meant nothing to them anymore. "Dr. Carter, I need you to record a detailed statement about the attack," Captain Walsh said. Every word the Zephyrian commander said, every action their ships took. This information will go directly to the Prime Minister and Earth Command. Helen nodded and began recounting the events, but her mind kept returning to the moment Dr. Murphy was lost to space. A brilliant young scientist who had dedicated her life to helping others, killed by aliens who couldn't tell the difference between medical research and weapons development. As the rescue ship headed back toward Earth, Helen realized that something fundamental had changed. For 60 years, humanity had maintained peace through careful neutrality and diplomatic restraint. But the Zephyrians had just demonstrated that they viewed human civilians as acceptable casualties in their war. The attack on the Titan research station wasn't just a mistake. It was a declaration that Earth's neutrality would no longer be respected. Helen wondered if the Zephyrians understood what they had just done. They had given humanity a reason to abandon 30 years of careful non-interference. They had made the fatal mistake of killing innocents and calling it justified. Prime Minister Elizabeth Stone stood before the emergency session of Earth's Governing Council, her hands trembling slightly as she held the casualty report from the Titan research station. The council chambers, normally filled with quiet debate and careful diplomacy, now buzzed with angry voices and demands for immediate action. 127 civilian deaths, she announced, her voice carrying across the packed room. Scientists, researchers, medical technicians, people who dedicated their lives to helping others, murdered by the Zephyrian Empire based on false intelligence and paranoid accusations. Council member Frank Rodriguez from the American Federation slammed his fist on his desk. 30 years we've maintained neutrality. 30 years we've stayed out of their war while they tore the galaxy apart. And this is how they repay our restraint? By attacking a medical research facility. The Zephyrian ambassador claims it was a legitimate military target. Prime Minister Stone replied. He insists their intelligence services had proof that Dr. Carter's team was developing biological weapons. That's complete nonsense, and everyone knows it, interrupted Council member Maria Santos from the European Alliance. The Titan facility's research was public knowledge. They were developing treatments for refugee injuries, not weapons targeting anyone. Admiral Susan Wright entered the council chambers wearing her full dress uniform, her expression grim but determined. As head of Earth's Deep Space Fleet, she had been reviewing military options since the attack began. The data she carried would reshape humanity's role in the Galactic War. Prime Minister, Council members, I have intelligence that changes our understanding of this conflict, Admiral Wright announced. For 30 years, we believed that maintaining neutrality kept Earth safe, because we were too weak to matter in a galactic war. We were wrong on both counts. She activated the main display screen, showing detailed analysis of alien military capabilities compared to human technology. The data was surprising and would have been encouraging under different circumstances. Our ships are faster than anything either alien faction possesses, Wright continued. Our sensors are more accurate, our computers are more advanced, and our weapons technology has progressed far beyond what either side realizes. We stayed neutral because we thought we were weak. In reality, we stayed neutral while becoming the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Council member Chin Lu from the Asian Coalition leaned forward with interest. Admiral, are you suggesting that Earth could actually win a war against these alien empires? I'm suggesting that both alien factions have been systematically underestimating human capabilities for decades. They view us as a primitive species that got lucky with faster-than-light travel. They have no idea what we're actually capable of. Dr. Lisa Blake, who had been monitoring alien communications from Aurora's edge, appeared on screen via secure transmission. Her analysis of intercepted Zephyrian and Keldan military communications supported Admiral Wright's assessment. Both alien factions discuss humans in their strategic planning documents, Lisa reported. They consider Earth a minor power with limited military potential. The Zephyrians rate our threat level as negligible, and the Keldans classify us as technologically inferior. Neither side has updated their assessment of human capabilities in over 20 years. Prime Minister Stone studied Intellig. Gents data with growing amazement. Earth's military-industrial complex had continued advancing during 3 decades of peace, developing new technologies and building ships that had never been tested in actual combat. What looked like peaceful neutrality had actually been a period of unprecedented military preparation. The question before us, Admiral Wright said, is whether we use this advantage to protect ourselves or to end the war that has been destroying the galaxy for 30 years. Commander Jake Morrison's voice came through from Aurora's edge, where he had been coordinating with other monitoring stations. Prime Minister, I'm receiving reports of massive public demonstrations across Earth. New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney. People are demanding military action against the Zephyrians. On cue, the sound of crowd noise filtered into the council chambers from the streets outside. Millions of humans who had accepted neutrality as necessary were now calling for justice. The attack on civilian researchers had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for decades. The polls are clear, reported Communications Director Kate Williams. 87% of Earth's population supports military intervention. They're not just angry about the Titan attack. They're angry about 30 years of watching genocide from the sidelines. Council member Rodriguez stood up, his voice filled with passion. My grandfather fought in the last war Earth participated in, back when we were still limited to one star system. He always said that good people have a responsibility to stop evil when they have the power to do so. We have that power now. But do we have the right to reshape the galaxy according to our values? Asked Council Member Santos. These alien civilizations have been fighting for longer than human space travel has existed. What gives us the authority to interfere? Admiral Wright switched the display to show current casualty estimates from the Galactic War. The numbers were staggering and growing larger every day. Ma'am, they've killed over 40 billion sentient beings in 30 years. They've destroyed entire star systems and rendered dozens of worlds uninhabitable. At what point does non-interference become complicity? Prime Minister Stone looked around the council chambers at faces filled with anger, determination, and fear. The decision before them would determine humanity's future and possibly the future of every species in the galaxy. Neutrality had kept Earth safe, but it had also allowed unimaginable suffering to continue unchecked. Admiral Wright, if Earth decided to intervene militarily, what would our objectives be? Total cessation of hostilities between all parties. Wright replied immediately. Establishment of human peacekeeping zones around refugee populations. Dismantling of both sides' planet-killing weapons. Creation of neutral territories where civilian populations can rebuild without fear of attack. That sounds like conquest disguised as peacekeeping. Observed Council Member Liu. With respect, sir, it sounds like the only way to stop 40 billion more people from dying while we debate the ethics of intervention. Commander Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system again. Prime Minister, I'm receiving word that Captain Ryan Torres has volunteered to lead a human diplomatic mission to both alien factions. He wants to offer them one chance to end the war peacefully before we take military action. And if they refuse? Admiral Wright's expression hardened. Then we remind them why Earth stayed out of their war for 30 years. Not because we were weak, but because we were hoping they would come to their senses before we had to stop them ourselves. The vote was closer than expected, but decisive. Earth would abandon 30 years of neutrality and enter the Galactic War, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers determined to end the killing that had consumed entire civilizations. As the council session ended and preparations for war began, Prime Minister Stone reflected on the irony of the situation. The Zephyrians had attacked a human research station because they feared Earth was secretly choosing sides. Their paranoia had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Earth had stayed out of the war until aliens made the fatal mistake of forcing them to choose sides. Now they would discover what humanity was capable of when roused to action. Colonel Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the U.S. Pacific Dawn, watching her tactical display as human ships moved into position across 3 star systems. Operation Silent Thunder had been planned in just 2 weeks, but it represented 30 years of careful observation and strategic preparation. Earth was about to announce its presence in the Galactic War with devastating precision. All ships report ready, Colonel, reported Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker from the Fighter Coordination Station. Stealth systems are operating at full efficiency. Neither alien faction has detected our approach. Amy nodded and checked the countdown timer. In exactly 17 minutes, human forces would simultaneously strike Zephyrian forward bases across the Vega, Altair, and Proxima systems. The attacks were designed to disable rather than destroy, but they would demonstrate capabilities that would shock both alien factions. Commander Morrison, status report from Aurora's Edge, Amy requested. Jake Morrison's voice came through clearly from a monitoring station. All target zones are clear of civilian traffic. Zephyrian military installations are operating on routine schedules. They have no idea what's coming. The Pacific Dawn was humanity's most advanced stealth cruiser, equipped with technology that rendered it invisible to standard alien sensors. Similar ships were positioned throughout Zephyrian space, their crews ready to deliver a coordinated message that Earth's neutrality was officially over. Colonel Foster, this is Admiral Wright aboard the New Horizon, came the transmission from the command ship. All task forces are in position. You're authorized to begin the operation. Amy took a deep breath and activated the fleet communication system. This is Colonel Foster to all human forces. Operation Silent Thunder is now active. Remember, we're not here to conquer or destroy. We're here to demonstrate that the galaxy has a new power player, and that power is interested in ending this war. The first targets were Zephyrian sensor arrays and communication stations. Human electronic warfare specialists had studied alien technology for decades, learning exactly how to disable their systems without causing permanent damage. Within minutes, Zephyrian forces across 3 systems found themselves blind and unable to communicate with their command structure. Lieutenant Commander Parker led the first fighter strike against the Zephyrian naval base at Vega Prime. His squadron of 12 fighters approached the alien fleet using flight patterns that no Zephyrian pilot had ever seen before. Human ships moved with precision and coordination that demonstrated years of tactical training. Target the command ship's engine systems. Parker instructed his pilots. Disable their ability to maneuver, but leave life support intact. We want prisoners who can carry a message back to their superiors. The Zephyrian fleet consisted of 47 warships, including 3 massive dreadnoughts that had terrorized Keldon colonies for years. Against human fighters using electromagnetic pulse weapons, they were helpless. Parker's squadron disabled the entire fleet in less than 30 minutes without firing a single explosive round. Pacific Dawn, this is Fighter 1. Parker reported, Vega Prime fleet is neutralized. No casualties on either side. The Zephyrians are demanding to know who we are and what we want. Colonel Foster smiled grimly. The Zephyrians were about to learn that underestimating humanity had been their greatest strategic error. Tell them they've been defeated by the species they attacked at the Titan Research Station. Tell them Earth is no longer neutral in this war. Similar scenes played out across the other target systems. At Altair Station, Commander Janahill's task force used advanced jamming technology to turn Zephyrian weapons against each other. The aliens found their own targeting systems locking onto friendly ships while human vessels remained completely undetected. At Proxima Base, Captain Robert Kim demonstrated human boarding capabilities by capturing an entire Zephyrian command center without firing a shot. Human soldiers in advanced armor suits simply walked through alien defenses that couldn't detect or stop them. The most impressive display came from engineer Marcus Webb, who had developed a method for remotely accessing Zephyrian computer systems. From his position aboard the New Horizon, Webb took control of an entire Zephyrian battle station and forced it to broadcast surrender signals to its own fleet. Colonel Foster were receiving transmissions from Zephyrian High Command, reported the Pacific Dawn's communication officer. They're demanding an immediate ceasefire and requesting negotiations. Tell them they can negotiate with Captain Torres when he arrives at their capital world tomorrow. Amy replied, Until then, any Zephyrian ship that approaches human forces will be disabled and impounded. The operation had been planned to last 6 hours. It was completed in 90 minutes. Admiral Wright's voice came through on the command channel, carrying a note of satisfaction. All objectives achieved. Zephyrian forward bases across 3 systems have been neutralized with 0 human casualties. Enemy casualties are minimal, mostly consisting of minor injuries during boarding operations. The strategic impact was enormous. In less than 2 hours, human forces had demonstrated the ability to strike anywhere in Zephyrian space at will. They had disabled entire fleets without destroying them, captured strategic installations without massive bombing campaigns, and done it all while remaining essentially invisible to enemy sensors. More importantly, they had shown that Earth possessed military technology far beyond anything either alien faction had imagined. The galaxy's strategic balance had shifted permanently. Colonel, we're getting reports from our monitoring stations. Commander Morrison reported from Aurora's Edge. Both the Zephyrian and Keldon governments have called emergency sessions. Keldon intelligence is frankly trying to figure out who attacked their enemies, and Zephyrian military commanders are demanding explanations for how their entire forward fleet was defeated by unknown forces. Amy checked the tactical display one more time. Human ships were withdrawing from Zephyrian space as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind disabled alien fleets and captured installations. The message was clear. Earth could strike anywhere, anytime, and neither alien faction could stop them. All ships, this is Colonel Foster. Operation Silent Thunder is complete. Return to designated rally points and prepare for Phase 2 operations. Outstanding work, people. We've just announced humanity's arrival as a galactic power. As the Pacific Dawn headed back toward Earth space, Amy reflected on what they had accomplished. For 30 years, both alien factions had dismissed humanity as technologically inferior. They had assumed that Earth's neutrality came from weakness rather than choice. Now they knew better. Earth had stayed out of the war not because they couldn't fight, but because they had been hoping the aliens would stop killing each other before humanity had to intervene. That hope was gone, replaced by determination and a conflict that had consumed the galaxy for 3 decades. The first strike was complete. The galaxy would never be the same. The emergency meeting between Zephyrian High Command and the Keldon War Council took place on the neutral world of Nexus Station, a trading post that had somehow avoided destruction during 30 years of galactic war. Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire faced Supreme Commander Yolta of the Keldon Federation across a table that had once been used for peaceful trade negotiations. Dr. Lisa Blake monitored their communications from Aurora's edge, translating the urgent discussions between species that had been trying to exterminate each other for 3 decades. What she heard confirmed humanity's strategic predictions about alien psychology and decision-making. The humans possess technology that makes our fleets obsolete. Admiral Kethvar was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. They disabled 47 of our warships in 30 minutes without sustaining a single casualty. Our weapons couldn't even target their vessels. You expect us to believe that the primitive species from Earth has somehow developed superior military technology? Supreme Commander Yolta replied with obvious skepticism. This is clearly a Keldon deception using captured Zephyrian equipment. Commander Morrison, are you getting this? Lisa asked through the communication link to the monitoring station's command center. Jake Morrison was indeed listening, along with Captain Ryan Torres, who had been analyzing alien psychology profiles for weeks. The conversation at Nexus Station was unfolding exactly as human strategic planners had predicted. They can't accept that they underestimated us, Ryan observed. Both sides are so invested in viewing humans as technologically inferior that they're creating conspiracy theories rather than facing reality. The alien discussion continued with increasing hostility. Despite facing a common threat that had just demonstrated the ability to defeat both their fleets simultaneously, the Zephyrians and Keldons were unable to overcome decades of mutual hatred long enough to form an effective alliance. If the humans have such advanced technology, why did they remain neutral for 30 years? Admiral Kethvar demanded. Why reveal themselves now? Because you attacked their civilian research station, you fool, Commander Yolta snapped back. Even primitive species will fight when you slaughter their non-combatants. The Titan facility was developing biological weapons targeting Zephyrian genetic markers. Our intelligence was clear on this point. Your intelligence was wrong, as usual. The humans were conducting medical research to help war refugees. I reviewed their published data myself. Lisa shook her head in amazement. Even while discussing the threat that human intervention posed to both their civilizations, the aliens couldn't stop blaming each other for the situation. Their psychological profiles indicated that cooperation between the species was essentially impossible. Captain Torres, this is playing out exactly as you predicted, Jake said. They're more interested in assigning blame than developing countermeasures. It gets better, Ryan replied, pulling up intelligence reports from human agents throughout the galaxy. Both sides are now accusing each other of secretly aligning with Earth. The Zephyrians think the Keldons provided humans with advanced weapons technology. The Keldons think the Zephyrians staged a Titan attack to trick Earth into joining the war on their side. The paranoia was spreading throughout both alien civilizations. Intercepted communications showed Zephyrian military commanders questioning whether Keldon infiltrators had sabotaged their defenses before the human attack. Keldon intelligence services were investigating whether Zephyrian spies had provided Earth with classified military information. Meanwhile, General Patricia Ross was leading human ground forces in liberating the refugee camps on Kepler 442b. The operation was proceeding with the same precision that had characterized the orbital strikes against Zephyrian bases, but with a very different objective. Captain Torres established communication links with moderate leaders among both alien factions, beings who had been advocating for peace negotiations throughout the conflict. These individuals represented civilian populations that were growing increasingly tired of a war that had consumed multiple generations. Captain, I'm receiving responses from peace advocates in both the Zephyrian and Keldon governments, reported communications specialist Beth Warren. They want to open direct negotiations with Earth about ending the conflict. What about the military leadership? Still convinced that humans are secretly allied with their enemies. Admiral Kefvar is claiming that human technology is actually advanced Keldan equipment. Commander Yolta is insisting that the Zephyrians provided Earth with classified military intelligence. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. Human strategists had counted on both alien factions being unable to accept that they had fundamentally misunderstood Earth's capabilities. Rather than adapting to the new reality, they were creating elaborate theories about human-alien conspiracies that made effective cooperation impossible. Dr. Blake continued monitoring alien communications as both governments struggled to respond to the human intervention. What she heard confirmed that the galaxy's power balance had shifted permanently. The civilian populations are starting to question their leadership, she reported to Admiral Wright aboard the New Horizon. Both sides have significant internal opposition movements that are gaining strength. People are asking why their governments were so wrong about human capabilities. More importantly, Jake added, they're asking why the war needed to continue for 30 years when humans were able to disable entire fleets in 90 minutes. Public support for continued fighting is collapsing on both sides. The tide of galactic opinion was turning against the war itself rather than just shifting between competing factions. Civilian populations that had endured 3 decades of destruction were beginning to wonder if their leaders had been prolonging the conflict unnecessarily. Admiral Wright reviewed the strategic situation from her command ship. Human forces had demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority, secured valuable intelligence from refugee populations, and successfully exploited the psychological weaknesses that made alien cooperation impossible. All task force commanders, this is Admiral Wright, prepare for Phase 3 operations. We're moving from demonstration strikes to active peacekeeping. Our objective is to end this war permanently, not just win it for one side or the other. The message was clear throughout the human fleet. Earth had not entered a galactic war to conquer alien civilizations or claim territory. They had intervened to stop the killing that had consumed 40 billion lives over 30 years. Both alien factions were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not their advanced technology, but their determination to create a galaxy where such wars could never happen again. The massive human fleet assembled at the edge of the Centauri Nebula represented the largest military force Earth had ever deployed. Admiral Susan Wright commanded over 300 ships from the bridge of the UES New Horizon, watching as both alien factions prepare for what they believe will be their final battle against the upstart humans who had dared to interfere in their war. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting the combined Zephyrian-Keldan fleet, reported Navigation Officer Tom Bradley. They've managed to coordinate their forces, after all. 600 ships total, including their planet-killer weapons platforms. Wright studied the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Despite decades of mutual hatred, both alien factions had finally overcome their paranoia long enough to unite against Earth. It was exactly what human strategists had hoped would happen, though for reasons the aliens couldn't possibly understand. Dr. Blake, what's the status of our information warfare campaign? Wright asked. Lisa Blake's voice came through from Aurora's Edge, where she had been coordinating the most ambitious propaganda operation in human history, broadcasting on all civilian frequencies across both alien territories. We're transmitting the complete history of how this war started, including classified documents from both governments. The information warfare was devastating. Human intelligence had uncovered the true origins of the Galactic War, and the facts were far different from what both alien populations had been told. The conflict hadn't started over noble principles or defensive necessity. It had begun because of a trade dispute that military leaders on both sides had escalated for their own political benefit. Captain Torres, how are the civilian populations responding? Wright inquired. Ryan Torres was aboard the diplomatic vessel UES Harmony, monitoring reactions across hundreds of alien worlds. Mass protests on 12 Zephyrian worlds and 15 Keldan colonies. Civilian populations are demanding explanations from their governments about why they weren't told the truth about the war's origins. The psychological impact was exactly what human planners had intended. Both alien civilizations were discovering that they had sacrificed billions of lives for a conflict that could have been resolved through negotiation. The revelation was undermining public support for continued fighting far more effectively than military victories could have achieved. Engineer Marcus Webb worked frantically at his console aboard the New Horizon, preparing for the most audacious technological demonstration in human history. Admiral, I've successfully infiltrated the control systems of both alien planet killer weapons. When you give the order, I can turn their own superweapons against their fleet. Outstanding work, Marcus. Hold that capability in reserve until we need it. The combined alien fleet moved into attack formation, their commander still believing that superior numbers would overcome human technological advantages. Admiral Kethvar and Supreme Commander Yolta had finally agreed to coordinate their assault, but their cooperation was fragile and based on mutual desperation rather than trust. All human ships, this is Admiral Wright, she announced over the fleet communication system. Remember that we're not here to destroy these civilizations. We're here to end a war that has consumed the galaxy for 30 years. Use minimum necessary force. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker led the fighter squadrons in the opening engagement, his pilots using the same electromagnetic pulse weapons that had proven so effective against Zephyrian ships. But this time, the aliens were prepared with hardened electronics and backup systems. Admiral, the alien fleet is adapting to our EMP weapons, Parker reported as his fighters engaged the lead enemy ships. They've learned from our previous strikes. This won't be as easy as the first battles. Wright had expected this development. Both alien factions have been studying captured human technology and developing countermeasures. The final battle would require humanity to reveal capabilities they had kept hidden during the earlier phases of the conflict. All ships, implement Protocol 7, Wright ordered. Show them what human ingenuity looks like when we stop holding back. Human ships suddenly began displaying flight patterns and tactical maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. Advanced gravitational manipulation technology allowed them to change direction without inertia, while quantum communication systems provided coordination capabilities that made the human fleet operate like a single organism. The alien response was immediate and desperate. Both factions deployed their planet-killing weapons, massive energy cannons capable of destroying entire worlds. The weapons had been used sparingly during the war because both sides feared the other would respond with equal devastation. Marcus, now would be an excellent time to demonstrate your computer skills, Wright said calmly as energy readings from the alien superweapons reached critical levels. Webb's fingers flew across his console as he activated programs that had been secretly installed in alien computer systems over the past several weeks. The planet-killer weapons powered up normally, but instead of targeting human ships, they locked onto the alien fleet itself. How is this possible? Admiral Kethvar's voice came through the communication channels, filled with panic and disbelief. Our weapons are targeting our own ships. Your computer systems have been compromised, Wright replied over the open channel. Human technicians have had administrative access to your networks for weeks. We could have destroyed your entire fleet at any time. The psychological impact was immediate and decisive. Both alien factions realized that humanity had been toying with them throughout the conflict. Human forces possessed not only superior weapons and tactics, but also the ability to turn alien technology against its creators. Supreme Commander Yolta's voice joined the communication. If you have such capabilities, why didn't you use them immediately? Why allow the fighting to continue? Because we hoped you would come to your senses before we had to demonstrate the full extent of human military technology, Wright replied. We gave you multiple opportunities to end this war peacefully. You chose to continue fighting. Captain Torres activated the diplomatic communication systems, broadcasting directly to both alien fleets and the civilian populations watching from across the galaxy. This war has killed over 40 billion sentient beings. It has destroyed entire star systems and rendered dozens of worlds uninhabitable. It started over a trade dispute that could have been resolved in a single negotiation session. The truth of that statement was undeniable. Human intelligence had uncovered the original documents that showed how a minor commercial disagreement had been escalated by military leaders who saw political opportunity in conflict. 3 decades of galactic war had grown from what should have been a diplomatic footnote. Both your civilizations possess the technology and resources to rebuild what this war has destroyed, Wright continued. You have the scientific knowledge to restore damaged ecosystems and the industrial capacity to house every refugee. What you lack is the will to choose cooperation over conquest. The alien fleet began to break apart as individual ships and entire squadrons started standing down. Faced with overwhelming evidence of human technological superiority and the devastating truth about their war's origins, many alien commanders chose surrender over continue fighting. Admiral Kefvar was among the last to accept reality. What are your terms for ending this conflict? Immediate cessation of all hostile activities. Dismantling of planet-killing weapons under human supervision. Establishment of neutral zones where refugee populations can rebuild. Most importantly, formal recognition that this galaxy is large enough for all of us to coexist peacefully. The Battle of Centauri Nebula ended not with massive explosions and glorious victory, but with a quiet surrender of civilizations that had finally understood the futility of their 3-decade conflict. Human forces had achieved complete victory without destroying a single alien ship or claiming a single alien world. The reckoning had come not through conquest, but through the demonstration that some species possessed the wisdom to end wars rather than simply win them. 6 months after the surrender at Centauri Nebula, Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt research station orbiting Kepler, 442b, watching construction teams from a dozen species working together to complete the galaxy's first multi-species medical facility. The irony wasn't lost on him that the planet, which had hosted desperate refugee camps, was now becoming a symbol of cooperation and renewal. Dr. Lisa Blake approached with her daily briefing, her role having evolved from monitoring alien communications to coordinating reconstruction efforts across 17 star systems. The latest reports on the former Zephyrian territories show remarkable progress. Agricultural production is up 40% from pre-war levels, and civilian casualties from conflict have dropped to zero for the first time in 30 years. Jake nodded, reviewing the data on his tablet. The transformation had been faster than anyone expected, but made sense when he considered the alternatives. After 3 decades of destruction, both alien civilizations were eager to try something different than mutual extermination. Any resistance to the new protocols? He asked. Some grumbling from former military leaders, but civilian populations are overwhelmingly supportive. Turns out that most beings prefer building things to destroying them, given the choice. The choice had been provided by humanity's new role as galactic peacekeepers. Rather than occupying alien worlds or imposing human government, Earth had established neutral zones where former enemies could work together on reconstruction projects. The psychological impact of cooperation was proving more effective than any military occupation could have been. Captain Ryan Torres materialized on the communication screen from his new position as Earth's first galactic ambassador. His office aboard the diplomatic station Unity 1 was busier than any human facility had ever been, processing requests for mediation from species across the galaxy. Jake, we just received formal applications for membership in the Galactic Cooperation Council from 6 more species, Ryan reported. The Altarians want to establish a joint research facility with human scientists. The Centaurians are offering to share their agricultural technology with former refugee populations. The Galactic Cooperation Council had been humanity's alternative to the military alliances that had dominated galactic politics for centuries. Instead of mutual defense pacts and territorial agreements, the Council focused on shared research projects, humanitarian aid, and economic cooperation that benefited all member species. What about the former military leadership? Jake inquired. Admiral Kefvar has been surprisingly cooperative. He's leading the effort to convert Zephyrian warships into medical and supply vessels. Supreme Commander Yolta is coordinating refugee resettlement programs in former Keldon space. The transformation of alien military leaders had been one of the most unexpected developments. Rather than punishing them for their role in the war, human administrators had offered them positions in reconstruction efforts. Many had discovered that building civilization was more satisfying than destroying it. Dr. Helen Carter's image appeared on another communication channel from the New Titan Memorial Research Center, which had been built near the site of the original station. The facility was now 10 times larger and staffed by scientists from over 20 species. Admiral Morrison, I wanted to report that we've achieved a major breakthrough in multi-species medical treatment protocols, Helen announced. The new techniques could revolutionize healthcare throughout the galaxy. Jake smiled at the title. His promotion to Fleet Admiral had been Earth's recognition that humanity's role in galactic affairs had changed permanently. The monitoring stations that had once simply observed conflicts now coordinated peaceful cooperation between species that had been enemies for generations. Helen, that's outstanding news. How soon can we begin implementation? We're ready to start training programs for medical personnel from all member species. Within a year, every world in the Cooperation Council could have access to treatment protocols that work for any sentient being. The medical advances were just one example of how cooperation was accelerating technological and social progress throughout the galaxy. Species that had been fighting each other were now sharing knowledge and resources in ways that benefited everyone. General Patricia Ross reported in from the former refugee camp that had become the new planetary capital of Kepler 442b. The transformation from desperate shantytown to thriving city had taken just 6 months and involved construction teams from 8 different species. Admiral, the Kepler development project is ahead of schedule and under budget, Patricia announced. We're seeing similar progress in all the reconstruction zones. It turns out that beings work much more efficiently when they're building homes instead of preparing for war. The Kepler project had become a model for reconstruction throughout the galaxy, rather than simply rebuilding what the war had destroyed. The mixed species teams were creating new cities and infrastructure designed for cooperation between different types of beings. Engineer Marcus Webb appeared on the final communication channel from his new position as Director of the Galactic Technology Sharing Initiative. His role involved ensuring that advanced technology was distributed fairly among all species rather than being hoarded by military forces. Admiral, we've successfully completed the dismantling of the last planet killer weapon, Marcus reported. The materials are being recycled into construction projects and scientific equipment. Both alien factions have formally committed to never building such weapons again. The elimination of planet-killing weapons had been humanity's first priority after the war ended. The technology to destroy entire worlds had made the galactic conflict far more devastating than it needed to be. Now that same technology was being used to build new worlds instead of destroying existing ones. Jake walked to the observation window and looked out at Kepler, 442b surface, where lights in the new cities created geometric patterns against the planet's natural landscape. Children from a dozen species played together in parks that had been built where refugee camps once struggled with overcrowding and disease. Status report from Earth? He asked. Lisa pulled up the latest data from home. Prime Minister Stone's approval ratings are at historic highs. The economy is booming from all the reconstruction contracts, and applications for the diplomatic corps have increased by 3,000%. Apparently, ending galactic wars is popular with voters. The benefits to Earth had been enormous, but secondary to the humanitarian objectives. Human technology companies were leading reconstruction efforts across 17 star systems. Human universities were hosting exchange students from dozens of alien species. Human culture was spreading throughout the galaxy, not through conquest, but through the simple appeal of cooperation over conflict. Admiral Susan Wright's voice came through on the fleet communication system from her position commanding the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. All sectors reporting continued peace. No military incidents anywhere in the former war zone for the past 93 days. 93 days without military conflict in a region that had seen daily battles for 30 years. It was a record that had seemed impossible just months earlier, but it was becoming the new normal as species discovered the benefits of working together instead of fighting each other. Any word from the Outer Rim territories? Jake asked. 3 more species have requested membership in the Cooperation Council. They're offering to share mining technology in exchange for access to human medical advances. We're looking at a completely peaceful galaxy within the next 5 years. Jake reflected on the journey that had brought humanity from neutral observers to galactic peacekeepers. Earth had stayed out of the war for 30 years, hoping that the alien civilizations would eventually find their own path to peace. The attack on the Titan research station had ended that hope, but it also provided an opportunity to create something better than either alien faction had imagined. The new galactic order wasn't built on military dominance or territorial conquest. It was based on the simple recognition that cooperation produced better results in conflict, and that the galaxy was large enough for everyone to prosper without fighting over resources. Dr. Blake, final question, Jake said, "Any signs of species that might threaten the new peace?" Lisa checked her monitoring data one more time. "Nothing on the sensors, Admiral. The galaxy seems to be learning that there are alternatives to solving problems through violence." As Jake watched the lights of the new city spread across Kepler, for 42B's surface, he realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had ended a war not by winning it, but by demonstrating that war itself was unnecessary when beings chose cooperation over conquest. Earth had stayed out of the war until aliens made the fatal mistake of attacking innocents. In responding to that mistake, humanity had discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military capabilities. It was their ability to imagine a galaxy where such wars never needed to happen again. The new order was just beginning, and it looked nothing like the old one. It looked like hope.